Dan, you've been thinking about free will probably almost as long as you've been thinking about consciousness. How do you account for the fact that many very serious philosophers call it an intractable problem, the biggest scandal in philosophy, something that there is no solution to?
Well, I'm not sure that many philosophers say that. If they do, I think they're faint-hearted. I think we've made significant progress on free will. The trouble is that the term free will has become a battleground now, and some people are just so sure that what free will has to be defined as is something that's incompatible with determinism. They think this is just definitive. Well, if you think that, then we don't have free will, but so what? Because it's not, the other side of free will is that it's supposedly what we need for moral responsibility, for our lives to have meaning. So I'm on the verge of giving away the term free will, saying, use it if you want it. I want to ask the question, is anything about modern science, modern materialistic neuroscience, that shows that we are not morally competent, or that we can't be morally competent? Can we be wired right for moral responsibility? Which I think the answer is a resounding yes. I don't think any of the experiments or any of the theories coming out of science shed any doubt on that at all. And that's where I think the action is showing people that the implications of a deterministic view are not dire. It's not nihilism. It doesn't show that we are deluded when we think we have the power, the competence to make moral choices. They think, well, it's not really a choice unless it's indeterministic. That's simply a confusion. You want your choices to be determined by the best evidence you have, and you want to be well informed, and you want your choices to be determined by your reasons for thinking this is the right thing to do. And none of that requires indeterminism, not a bit.
But even though each one of those pieces will have been determined by a prior sequence of events that cannot be otherwise. Is that the argument?
Yeah. But that...
It seems like that position becomes incoherent then. I mean, if it couldn't be otherwise, you don't have a certain kind of free will, and we have to lock people up. We have to have certain societal approaches to...
This is one of the fundamental confusions about what could have done otherwise means. Could have done otherwise has one completely vacuous meaning, and that's the one which implies indeterminism, which says that if the world were exactly atom for atom, particle for particle in a certain state, then there's only one possible future. Let's just grant that that's true. Does that show that a person, when trying to decide what to do, that this decision process is futile, that it isn't playing a causal role? No, it's still playing a very big causal role. And it's because it's playing a causal role that in the end, when the person makes the decision that the person makes, that decision couldn't have been otherwise. But that's what you want. You don't want a quantum coin flip deflecting you at the last possible moment. If you think of where you want the indeterminism to be, it turns out you don't need it. There's no place to put the indeterminism which will turn a constrained choice into a free choice.
I think both ends of the spectrum have serious coherent problems. On the view of determinism, I think we're dealing with that now, and on the other side, where is the joint that you can get quantum is random? That's not how is random free will? I think that if you could be on either extreme, the argument, I have felt is if you could be on one extreme, you have to say there is absolute determinism and there's no choice and we can define morality.
No.
Or on the other side, you have to say there's some non-physical element. You can't get indeterminism with things in the physical world. So,
well, let me go back to your first alternative. There's absolute determinism and there's no choice. Oh, let's compare that with some other things. There's absolute determinism, so there's no avalanches. Now, of course, A determined avalanche is still an avalanche.
Sure.
And a determined choice is still a choice. And a determined free choice is still a determined free choice. What on earth can that mean? It can mean it is a choice that you were determined to make, given you're determined to be a rational, competent human being, determined to have the facts that you had at your disposal. You were determined to be not very distracted at the moment, and you were determined at that point to decide the best thing to do here is to push the button. And so you push the button. That was a free choice.
And using determined in the rigorous sense, or determined
in the rigorous sense, yes. Consider the following two sentences. If determinism is true, then the future is determined. That's tautology. If determinism is true, then the future is inevitable. That's nonsense. If determinism is true, then all my actions are inevitable. All my choices are inevitable. That's nonsense. It does not make sense. When you think about what inevitable means, it means unavoidable. But avoiding, there can be determined avoiding. There's lots of it. If I throw a brick at your head and you duck, you're determined by the light bouncing off the brick into your eyes and you duck.
Right, but I avoided it.
You avoided it.
Right. All right. How about on the other?
That's a real case of avoidance. So avoidance does not require indeterminism. So determinism does not imply inevitability.
Okay. So on the other side, is it possible, staying within the physical world, to have a libertarian, totally open, free choice?
I don't think it is. The best attempt at this that I've seen is Robert Kane's, and I devoted a careful, sympathetic chapter to that theory in my book Freedom Evolves, and showed that he makes some very interesting points. But in the end, indeterminism isn't playing any role for him. It turns out to be a wheel that turns that doesn't move anything. If you think you need indeterminism at the moment of decision, then consider two possibilities. One is there's something local and indeterministic that happens right then and there that makes your decision free. Or instead, suppose that moment is determined by something that was indeterministic, but that was beamed in on a photon from outer space, was actually fixed 100 years ago, and the light's been traveling ever since. And now the moment of indeterminism that matters happened before you were born. And in fact, I think folk wisdom already appreciates that. Publishers Clearinghouse has, you may already have won. Why did they do that? Why would anybody even consider a lottery where the tickets were chosen before they were handed out? You still have a chance. And in fact, if determinism is true, then all your lottery tickets were chosen long before you were born. So what? Well, but then some people are determined to have more luck than others. That's true even if indeterminism is true. That's true anyway. Indeterminism and determinism just make no difference at all to the free will issue.
So what you're saying in free will is that the two extremes need to be appreciated in order to understand where it really is. On the one hand, for indeterminism to really be true, you can't do that in the physical world. Is that right?
I don't think there is a materialistic, physicalistic, coherent, indeterministic theory of free will which has anything to offer that, say, my view doesn't.
And on the other side, if you have a fully determined world, you can still have a form of free will that you've described.
Indeed, you can have a form of free will, and it's the form of free will that matters. It's the one, because not all of us have it. The people who are disabled mentally in one way or another, they don't have free will, often through no fault of their own. But we treat them differently, morally differently, because they don't have that kind of free will. The free will that matters is the kind that some of us have and some of us don't. And the idea that is now, to my dismay, gaining credence in some quarters, that there's really no difference between, white-collar criminals and psychopathic murderers is preposterous. There really is.